They said it was just a family discussion, but somehow I was the one being judged. The dining room smelled like rosemary chicken and lemon glaze, but my stomach was clenched tight. The mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier's glow, polished to reflect every stiff smile and every unspoken accusation. I sat at the far end, next to Gavin, whose fingers fidgeted with his cloth napkin like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew. Margaret, his mother, presided over the table like a queen on a throne, chin up, pearls flawless, tone sharper than any blade. "This is just a conversation," she had said, with that sugary venom only she could master. "Nothing official, just family, coming together." Family. That word had been stretched thin over the years. Ever since I married Gavin, I'd learned that, in this house, family was synonymous with compliance. You were family as long as you didn't question the system, and tonight I had broken that rule. It started 3 days ago. Sloane, Gavin's younger sister, had shown up on our doorstep wearing faux humility like an oversized coat. Her eyes were too wide, her tone too soft. "I just need a little help," she had said, voice cracking perfectly, like a well-rehearsed monologue. "It's temporary, I swear $15,000. That was the little help she needed. To fix the latest disaster in a long line of failed hustles, this time a skincare brand run out of a rental condo in Reno. I told her no. Calmly, respectfully, honestly. I told her we were in the middle of home repairs, that Gavin and I had agreed not to touch our savings, and most importantly, that I couldn't risk that amount on someone who had never followed through on a single promise. Sloane smiled, said she understood, left with an exaggerated hug, and now here I was. 3 days later, at Margaret's house, at this impromptu dinner with linen napkins, the whole family in attendance, including cousins I hadn't seen in years, all except Sloane, who was running late. Harold, Gavin's father, stood with a brandy in hand and cleared his throat. "We've been thinking," he began, scanning the room like a foreman surveying subordinates. "Sloane is in trouble, and trouble for one of us is trouble for all of us." I folded my hands in my lap. Gavin didn't meet my gaze. "We know you have the means, Lena," Margaret added sweetly. "You've always been careful with money." My knuckles whitened. "We've decided to call a family vote," Harold announced, "to see if everyone agrees that you and Gavin should help her, just for a while." A family vote, like I was some line item in a budget. Gavin still said nothing, not a word, just that damn napkin twisting in his lap. I turned to him. "Are you serious?" His face looked tired. "Or scared. Maybe both," Margaret chimed in. "Majority rules. That way, it's fair." Fair. I let the word echo in my head as each hand went up, one by one. Yes, yes, yes. Even from Gavin's cousin Mark, who once got drunk and threw up in our guest bathroom and never apologized, I was the last one left. All eyes on me, waiting. Like a spotlight was burning into my skin. I took a breath, slow and deliberate. My pulse had steadied. I smiled. "Then let's vote on something else." They thought I'd cry. I brought contracts instead. The silence that followed my smile had a texture to it, dense like fog curling into lungs. I didn't break eye contact with Margaret as I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim, manila folder. Not dramatic, no slamming, just movement so calm it became unsettling. I placed it gently in front of me on the table. Margaret's posture stiffened. Harold blinked twice, as if I'd pulled out a loaded weapon instead of paperwork. "I assume," I said evenly, "that since this family believes in votes, you'll appreciate full transparency." Gavin shifted beside me. He still hadn't said a word. His silence had grown teeth. I opened the folder slowly and slid the first page across the polished wood. It was a copy of the property deed for our house, the one Gavin and I lived in for the past 6 years. My name, only mine. Signed, notarized, stamped with official ink. The ink hadn't faded. Neither had the intention. "I bought out Gavin's portion of the house last year," I said. "It was a private agreement, legal, documented." Harold leaned forward, squinting. "What are you saying?" I flipped to the next document. This one was neater, more recent. The prenup amendment, drawn up and certified 2 months ago. My lawyer had called it future-proofing. I called it insurance. Also, I added, placing the second sheet beside the first, we updated our marital agreement. Gavin signed it. I left it on his nightstand. Gavin's brows pulled together like he was trying to remember a dream he didn't want to admit having. I thought that was just a draft, he muttered. You thought wrong. The silence didn't explode. It just pressed harder. Margaret's lips were a thin, trembling line. She looked like she'd bitten into a lemon but couldn't spit it out. I don't understand, she said slowly. What are you trying to do? I'm protecting myself, I said. The same way you were trying to protect Sloane. Only I didn't need a vote. As if summoned, the front door opened and in walked the star of the evening. Sloane. She wore sunglasses pushed up on her head, a green silk blouse unbuttoned one too many times, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She carried a cup of iced coffee, like this was brunch and not a financial ambush. Sorry I'm late, she sang, sliding into the only empty chair, the one directly across from me. Did I miss dessert or just the drama? No one answered. Her gaze flicked to the folder on the table, then to Gavin's rigid frame, to Margaret's clenched jaw. Her smile faltered. What happened? She asked, voice thinner. I looked at her, straight through her. I voted too, I said. With lawyers? Sloane blinked. Margaret stood up suddenly. You brought this here? She snapped, gesturing to the folder like it was a threat. Into our home? I met her outrage with apathy. You turned it into a courtroom. I just brought my defense. Harold rubbed his temples. Gavin looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. This is unnecessary, Margaret continued. You're making it bigger than it is. Am I? I asked. Because when 10 people vote against me in my marriage, that seems pretty big. You did this without telling me, Gavin finally said, voice soft like he was asking if I'd canceled a dinner reservation, not restructured our entire legal foundation. I turned to him. Like you did with the vote? His mouth opened, then closed. For once he had no argument. The room stayed quiet. Tension settled like a second tablecloth across the room. I could feel something shifting. Tether lines snapping, assumptions breaking under their own weight. Then from the far end of the table, a voice I hadn't expected. She's not the only one who's been quiet, Tasha said softly. Every head turned. Even mine. The truth doesn't explode. It seeps through the cracks. The dining room was quieter than a tomb. Someone had turned off the music an hour ago, but no one remembered when. Even the ice in the water glasses had melted into stillness. We were frozen in that silence, trapped with it, breathing it in like dust from a collapsed ceiling. No one dared speak. Until Tasha stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I've been quiet long enough, she said, eyes fixed on Sloane. The air shifted, almost imperceptibly. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. Sloane looked up from her phone, confused, but still trying to appear unbothered. Tasha reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper and her phone. Last year, Sloane asked me for a loan, $10,000. She said it was urgent, something about a Tesla flip and a cash window. Said she'd pay me back in 6 weeks. Sloane scoffed. That's ridiculous. Tasha didn't blink. She held up the bank transfer confirmation. It's right here. April 3rd, 2022. You ghosted me a month later. Never paid me back. Never even brought it up. Don't be dramatic, Sloane said, her voice sharper now. I said I'd pay you. You never even asked. You vanished, Tasha replied, more forcefully than I'd ever heard from her. I let it go because I didn't want to start drama in the family. But watching what you did to Lena just now, I'm done protecting you. Harold leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. Is this true? Sloane laughed. Too high, too quick. This is insane. She's twisting it. I told her it would take time. I didn't vanish. You blocked me, Sloane, Tasha said coldly. On everything. I stayed silent. My eyes didn't leave Gavin, who was frozen like a man watching a glass fall in slow motion, knowing it would shatter, powerless to stop it. I gave her $5,000, came another voice. It was Greg, one of Gavin's cousins, sitting halfway down the table. Last summer. She said it was for a real estate course. I put it on my credit card. A pause. I haven't seen a dime back, he added. Sloane's face cracked. The casual mask slipped. Just a little. You guys are seriously doing this now? You're just jumping on the bandwagon to what? Make me look bad? You don't need help with that, Tasha said. Sloane stood up, eyes blazing. This is character assassination. You're all just bitter. Margaret tried to step in. Let's not make this a witch hunt. We don't know all the facts. I do, Tasha said, and apparently I'm not the only one. More murmurs from the far end of the table. People who had been quiet were looking at each other. And Sloane. One aunt whispered, She asked us for something too. We said no. My fingers grazed the folder still sitting on the table, closed now, but radiating quiet power. I didn't need to say anything yet. Sloane turned to Gavin. Are you going to let them do this to me? He looked at her, then down at the table, didn't say a word. I watched him, every line in his body tight. The same man who had stood by me at our wedding, now wilting under the weight of his own silence, and suddenly something slid into focus. 3 months ago, I had checked our joint account. There had been a withdrawal, $9,200. Gavin said it was for emergency roof repairs. He'd even shown me a contractor's invoice, a fake invoice. He had insisted I didn't need to follow up, that he'd handled it. I looked at him now, really looked. The stiffness, the guilt, the avoidance. You moved it, didn't you? I asked quietly. He didn't respond. Sloane didn't just go around me, I said, still addressing him. She went through you. His jaw clenched. I felt something burning just beneath my ribs, but it wasn't rage. Not anymore. It was clarity. Then maybe you should tell them how much of our money is already gone. Gavin's head sank slightly, as if gravity had finally remembered him. Everyone at the table looked between us, between the man they thought they knew and the woman they had underestimated. Then a whisper. Tasha leaned slightly closer to me and said, just loud enough to hear, we need to talk. Privately. He didn't deny it. That was worse than lying. The rain hadn't started yet, but the clouds outside pressed low and heavy, threatening to break at any second. Inside the cafe, the warmth of cinnamon and burnt espresso couldn't cover the tension curling between us. I sat across from Tasha at a small corner table, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. My pulse was steady now. I had passed through anger. What came next felt colder, cleaner. Tasha slid her phone across the table. You should see this. The screen displayed a banking app. Clean, clinical numbers, dates, transactions. At first they meant nothing, but then my eyes locked on the familiar account number in the sender field. It was one of ours, the joint account. It's his, Tasha said quietly. A secondary account under his name only, but the money? It came from yours. Yours and his. $9,200, exactly the same amount as the roof repair Gavin had explained away 3 months ago. The contractor had never followed up, never sent final paperwork. Gavin told me not to worry. He'd handled it. I thought I'd buried the doubt. You sure it's his? I asked, though I already knew. She nodded. The routing info matches, and the transfers were timed almost exactly to the date Sloane wired money out of her LLCA trapdoor opened inside me. Not a fall, just a sharp drop into stillness. And this, Tasha said, producing a printed email, was sent to your parents, from an address registered to a dummy domain. Look at the name it was sent under. I did. Lena.Hartley@investwithus.co. I felt my chest hollow out. They told me about this yesterday, I murmured. They thought I had changed careers. Said they were surprised I didn't mention a new business. They almost wired $10,000, Tasha said, voice clipped, until your mom got suspicious and called me. I stared at the paper. The font was casual, friendly. The body text sounded like something I might write. if I were trying too hard to sound easygoing. Gavin knew my tone. Sloane had my phrasing. Together, they crafted a version of me that could lie. "It was sent from your home IP," Tasha added. "I traced it. The email headers don't lie." My hand twitched slightly around the mug. "So they were using me," I said. "Not just my money, my name, my parents?" Tasha nodded. "It's bigger than just a bad loan." I leaned back, feeling the weight settle where outrage used to live. "He didn't even try to hide it," I whispered. "No," she agreed. "He thought you'd never check." I let silence sit between us for a beat. Then I asked, "Why are you helping me?" Tasha's face tightened. "Because I was a coward for too long. I thought staying neutral made me noble, but all it did was enable them. And I saw what they tried to do to you." I looked out the window at the shifting sky. "I'm not running." Tasha didn't speak. "I want them all at the table, one last time." The words tasted like steel. She smiled, a grim, approving thing. "Then let's make sure you're ready." I pulled out my phone, opened the last text thread from Margaret, where she had sent the dinner invitation I hadn't responded to. My fingers didn't hesitate. "I'll be there this Sunday. Keep a seat for me." They expected silence. I brought receipts. The table was exactly as I remembered, polished, symmetrical, overcompensating. A floral centerpiece sat like a crown in the middle, surrounded by fine china and wine glasses arranged with mathematical precision. Margaret always set the table herself, down to the last fold of the napkins. Control, after all, was her native language. It reminded me of our wedding reception. That long table stretched out on the garden lawn, a younger me seated between Gavin and Margaret. That day, she leaned in and said, "At this table, loyalty comes before everything." It wasn't a blessing, it was a warning. This Sunday evening, the room hummed with fake warmth. The same forced laughter, the same polished silver. Sloane chatted about her new boutique brand to anyone who'd listen. Gavin poured wine like nothing had changed. Tasha, across from me, sipped water with a stillness I now recognized as preparation. I smiled when appropriate, answered when spoken to, watched as they all pretended the vote, the documents, and the truth had evaporated with the last Sunday's tension. Let them get comfortable. It's easier to flip a chair when someone is relaxed in it. The moment dessert hit the table, a pear tart with a walnut crust, I stood up. The scraping of my chair cut across the conversation like a scalpel. I reached into my bag and pulled out the same folder I'd brought before. But this time, I didn't just place it gently, I spread its contents like a hand of cards. "This," I said, tapping the first sheet, "is a transaction record, a transfer from our joint account to Gavin's personal shell." Same day, Sloane received a private investment. Margaret's smile faltered. "This is an email," I continued, sliding over the printout. "Sent to my parents from an address Gavin created, pretending to be me, promising returns, using my name." A few gasps broke the surface tension. "And this," I said, placing the last page flat, "is a report on the LLC Sloane registered last year. Its only activity, receiving money from accounts linked to Gavin." Harold leaned forward. "Is this real?" I didn't answer. I turned to Tasha. She didn't hesitate. "I've confirmed it all," she said, placing her phone on the table. "Here are the texts Gavin sent me, asking me to cover for the initial transfer. Said he'd pay me back before Lena found out." Margaret's voice cracked. "Why would you do that, Gavin?" He looked pale. Sweat traced his temple. His hand gripped the stem of his wine glass like it might anchor him to the floor. I didn't know how else to fix it," he said finally. "Sloane needed help, and I thought I could get it back before Lena noticed." "You lied to us?" Margaret's voice rose to a pitch I hadn't heard in years. Gavin turned to me, as if I might save him, as if I hadn't been the one drowning all along. "I didn't know how else to fix it before she found out." I didn't say anything. I just nodded once, a small, tight gesture that said everything. I wasn't surprised, not anymore, just done. They took a vote without me. I made my own. The table was quiet now, not the kind of quiet that begged to be filled, but the kind that made people shrink into their seats. Dessert plates had been pushed aside. Wine glasses were half full, untouched. Nobody looked at me anymore. They all stared past me, or down at their hands, or into the dim chandelier light like something sacred had just cracked. I remembered a time, years ago, when Gavin had defended me. It was during our engagement. Margaret had made one of her cutting comments about my job as a hospital admin, calling it not exactly the kind of work that inspires. Gavin had wrapped his arm around me then, turned to his mother and said, "She keeps people alive and sane, Mom. What inspires you?" That night, I thought I'd married a man who would always speak up when it counted. Tonight, he hadn't spoken a word when they voted me into obligation, until it was too late. Now he reached across the table, not to grab the folder or refute what had been laid bare, but to touch my hand. "We can fix this," he said. His voice cracked. Not from volume, he wasn't shouting, but from something deeper, a fracture that had finally reached the surface. I looked at his hand but didn't take it. Instead, I opened my bag one last time. From inside, I pulled out a single folded page. Clean, simple, final. I placed it in front of him, angled slightly so he couldn't miss the bolded header at the top. Petition for divorce. Already signed on my end. Dated. Ready. His lips moved, but no sound came. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back without rush, without apology. "Majority rules, remember?" I said softly. "Well, I vote to leave." And then I turned and walked away. No one called my name. No one followed. Not Margaret, who once micromanaged every toast I made at holiday dinners. Not Harold, who always insisted I call him Dad. Not Sloane, who now stared down at the table like it might swallow her whole. And not Gavin, who had once made me believe that love meant safety. I reached the hallway, grabbed my coat, slung my bag over my shoulder. The front door opened with a quiet creak and shut with an even quieter click. Outside, the air was cool. Cleansing. I exhaled for the first time in hours. That night, I checked into a small inn on the edge of town. The room smelled like cedar and fresh linens. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, watching the shadows shift on the ceiling. Hours passed, then my phone buzzed once. A text from Tasha. "He's gone. No one said goodbye." I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the quiet finally settle. Then I put the phone face down, slid under the covers, and turned off the lamp. You don't need permission to walk out of a burning house, just courage. And I had that now. In the end, it wasn't the shouting that broke the silence. It was the truth, laid bare with no room left to hide. The very table they once used to corner her became the place she reclaimed her voice and dismantled the illusion they built. Justice did not roar in. She ushered it in herself, one receipt, one truth at a time. Because when betrayal is met with clarity and resolve, even the most fortified lies collapse. Some battles are not won by force, but by finally standing up and walking away. And sometimes the most powerful vote is the one cast alone.